من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون الذي لا يدركه بعد الحمم ولا يناله غوص الفطن ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وشفيء ذنوبنا سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين صاحب العصر والزمان خليفة الرحمن إمام الإنس والجان ولعن الله أعداءهم أجمعين إلى يوم الدين أما بعد فقد قال الله وقوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والنفس وما سواها فالهمها فجورها وتقواها قد أفلح من زكاها وقد خاب من دساها صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات على محمد وعلى محمد. Building Islamic courage has been our ongoing topic. Tonight is our third lecture. Our discussion since day number 1 has been talking a little bit about the concept of shuja'at in Islam. The idea of being a courageous individual. What does it mean in Islam to be courageous? In this day and age, we live in an age of fitna and fasad. We live in an age of confusion, of oppression, injustice, and tyranny. And for us to uphold our deen, uphold our madhab and our ideology requires some courage. It's very easy to run away from the path. It's very easy to change our names and change our appearances to not meet the typical image of Islam. But of course, as we know, that's not what's required from us today. If there are misconceptions of the deen, it's up to us and our akhlaq to change those misconceptions. If there is a confusion about what the reality of Islam is, it's up to us and our lifestyle to change and cure those confusions. And all of that requires courage. And we talked yesterday about the 5 levels of the huquq of the Ahlul Bayt, for those who were with me yesterday. We talked about the fact that a lot of it has to do with the fact that courage stems from trusting the Ahlul Bayt. But trust doesn't come that easily. Trust is the 5th level. 4 levels before that have to be achieved for the 5th level of trust to be there. The Shuhada of Karbala had immense trust in Abu Abdullah's mission. They would not do what they did without that trust. And that trust ultimately was the breeding ground for their courage. Today, we want to make it into a little bit of a personal discussion. Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam, he has a very beautiful description of who the courageous individual is. He says the individual who is the courageous of them all, sultanan ala nafsihi, he says. The one who has authority over himself. The one who is able to master himself. It's very ajib. If I don't master myself, who will master me? Who else is going to be my sultan besides me? And yet the emphasis is that the most courageous of them all is the one who is a sultan of himself. So we understand that the sheer idea that Amir al-Mu'mineen is describing the fact that this has to be done, that means that there are individuals who are not sultans of themselves. There are people who are slaves of themselves. We believe that slavery was abolished in the 60s, right? That's what you read in your history classes. This whole civil rights movement of Dr. King, let's say, abolished slavery. And yes, to some degree, of course, the way slaves were in the 60s in the US don't exist today. We don't have, bathrooms that are separated by color. We don't have section on the bus or seating on the bus that's separated by color. We don't have only black schools, only white schools. Granted, it's not there. But slavery hasn't gone anywhere. The definition of slavery has changed. There came a time where one person was the master and the other person was the slave. And that was the only definition of slavery. But in this day and age, slavery exists, but slavery exists in a different form, where the same person who is the master is also the slave as well. Where we are sometimes enslaved by our own selves and our own nafs. The Quran refers to people who are either enslaved by one master or enslaved by several masters. It doesn't even entertain the idea that you don't have a master. It says no, you are enslaved. You are an abd of some system. Either that system is a system of ilahi and divinity, or that system is of your nafs. And when you become an abd of your nafs, you become an abd of your soul, you become somebody who has lost that sultanate over yourself, that authority over yourself. And Amir al-Mu'mineen says the most courageous is the one who is opposite to that. The one who has a good grip on himself. So today, in our discussion, let's look at what this means. The most important ilm that all of us need to understand is the ilm of the nafs, the ilm of ourself. It must, it's a little bit of a psychoanalysis, it's a little bit of a psychology discussion, where you sit there and you tell yourself, okay, do you know yourself or do you not know yourself? Because the reality is sometimes we end up surprising our own selves. We put ourselves in positions and we end up reacting a certain way that even shocks us. And either we surprise us in a good way or we disappoint us in an evil way. To the point where we actually tell ourselves, look, that wasn't me, somebody else, I'm sorry. I lost control of myself. Or sometimes we believe that we have ourselves conquered. And then what ends up happening is that self comes back and bites us even harder. The very famous story of Rumi, as you know, or Mawlavi in Iran, Maulana in Iran as they call him. In his Mathnawi, he's got, these 2 thick volumes of poems. And Rumi's beauty was the fact that he would take Quranic principles and write poems about them in the form of stories. And one of my favorite stories that I often tell on the member is that of a snake catcher. It's a very famous story. Those of you who have even for a moment studied a little bit of Rumi, and if you guys are poets in the audience, I know some of you are hidden closet poets, I would, search up Rumi online and do your best to kind of, enter that world of his poetry. It's very mystic. His story is a very interesting one, and one that actually applies to us today. He says there was a snake catcher, and there are different versions of the story. The one that I have read says that there's a snake catcher in the village who wasn't very good at catching snakes. Didn't have much respect within the snake catching world. It was a winter day, cold winter day, probably in Toronto, because there was snow on the ground and it was up to the knees and the mountains were frozen. He decides to take a walk, and in the mountains he finds in front of him a python that's frozen. he thinks to himself, oh, this is my opportunity now to gain the respect I've lost. If I can lug this thing back into town, I can announce that I have caught this snake. Picks up the snake and lugs it back into town, right in the middle of the town circle, announces to everybody, everybody gather around. I want you now to begin to respect and praise me. I am the man who caught this python. Everyone's amazed. I can't believe it, a python. I mean, that's the snake catcher's gold. Amazing, everyone's in awe. He's feeling good about himself. All of a sudden the clouds begin to part and the sun comes beaming down. And slowly but surely the python that was frozen begins to thaw. The python was frozen, it wasn't dead. The python unfreezes, comes to life. The first thing it devours is the snake catcher. Rumi goes on to say that sometimes we believe, and our youth especially, in their egotistical nature, in their invincibility. Sometimes we think as young individuals that we're invincible, right? We're superheroes. Nothing can touch me. Sometimes we believe that we have caught our nafs. It's lying in front of us. I've conquered my nafs. Until the clouds part and the burning desire of our shahwa comes shining through. And once again revives that nafs that we thought was dead. It's not, though, it's frozen. And now the nafs begins to thaw and comes back with a vengeance. And the first thing it devours is us. So what do? We let our guard down. Right? We tell ourselves that, look, I've done this, I've done that, I've done that. I've conquered my nafs, alhamdulillah. I don't do these sins anymore. So we let our guard down. When our guard goes down, the nafs comes back with a vengeance and devours us. And then what ends up happening after that is all courage is lost. And hopelessness kicks in. Depression kicks in. Anxiety kicks in. Thoughts of suicide kick in. And to my parents, I ask you, I don't mean to scare anybody in this audience, but sometimes you have to pick up signs in your child. Amir al-Mu'mineen used to call the Holy Prophet a roaming physician. It's a beautiful title. It's such a beautiful title. A roaming physician is not a doctor in the office that waits for the marid to come to him. He picks up signs and goes to the marid, and before it's too late, cures him. Our problem sometimes in our homes and our communities is that we see that there is a brother, a family, a sister who's struggling. And she's struggling more every day that I see her. I don't say anything. I see my child who went from a very energetic, passionate, loud, entertaining, funny, charismatic child. And for some reason this year, she's quiet, Maulana. He's quiet, Maulana. Goes upstairs, closes the door, puts his headphones on, and shuns out the world. We'll blame college, we'll blame university, we'll blame age, we'll get mad at him. We'll punish him. All the while you have no idea what's happening inside of him. His world could be destroying itself day in and day out. He has nowhere to turn. Until one day, God forbid, you got a call from the hospital saying that, your son attempted suicide. You have to pump drugs out of his stomach. Again, I don't want to scare anybody here. I don't want to create issues where there are not issues. We get calls at 3 o'clock in the morning from hospitals saying, I've been told that you are the priest of this individual. Can you come and help us out? You would go, and the guy literally sits there and he attempted suicide. Now, a lot of times the attempt is a call for help, but those are warning signals. Before that even happens, we have to have a roaming physician-like philosophy and cut this individual movement from the West out actually go and say, look, sister, with all due respect, you look down to me for the past few weeks. Everything okay at home? Sometimes all you have to do is ask, sometimes our kids, is everything okay? And they'll break down in front of you in a second. They've been waiting for one person to come and ask me, are you okay? Instead of asking me, why didn't you take the garbage out, or wash the dishes, or pray salat, or do this, ask me, what's happening in your world right now? Is everything okay in your world right now? You're an 18-year-old at the peak of your youth, surrounded by Shaytan, asked to hold on to this deen. You're bound to have quiet days, tough days, difficult days. Because if we don't get that at home, they will get that outside. And this gang mentality that sometimes exists here in the West is a brotherhood type mentality, where they will absolutely attach themselves to those outside the home because they are giving them what you should be giving them. And so they're outside the house 24/7. They avoid the house at all costs. They come in when you're asleep, they leave before you wake up. All of this because sometimes they don't have the courage to be a sultan of themselves, to understand their own self. Because one of the main key discussions we have in the building of Islamic courage is what's called dushman shinasi in the world of the Hausa. To understand who your enemy is. When a group is coming back from war, a very famous hadith, they just fought a war. They're all sweaty, they're exhausted, there's scars all over their body. Some might even lost a limb. There's blood everywhere. They're victorious. They're dead. Not an ounce of energy left. Nothing is left. They collapse in front of the Holy Prophet. He says, congratulations, the minor jihad has been won. What? Are you kidding me? I gave everything to that arena of the war. Everything I had, and that's the minor one? Yeah, it's the minor one. The major one is more difficult. The major one is where the enemy doesn't have a face. The major one is where you don't fight somebody else, you fight yourself. The major one has the minor one has a certain time frame. After a while, a ceasefire, or surrender, or submission. This war is ila yawm al-qiyamah. The minor one starts at a certain time. The major one starts the moment you enter this world. And a lot of us are victims of the fact that we have allowed our animalistic dimension to overtake our angelic dimension. And that's what I want to describe tonight for all of you. Is that the human being is consisting of multiple dimensions. What does it mean that one can do dhulm on oneself? What does it mean that one can be a slave of oneself? What does it mean that one cannot or cannot be a sultan or have the authority of themselves? What happens when you become a slave of yourself? What happens in that arena? Let's understand this. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. I've had a very full day, and my battery right now is on 5%. If I had an iPhone, the bar would be red. So you have to just bear with me. I don't have my charger on me at the moment. My charger is your salawat, inshallah. So plug in my charger for me once in a while, nice and loud. I'm not complaining. It was a beautiful day, mashallah, full of beautiful faces and wonderful discussions. Alhamdulillah. The human being, as you know, is a complex being. The strangest creation of Allah is us. Usually, there are two different armies and two different commanders of that army. Follow me for a second. Usually, when you have two fighting forces, they're on opposite sides of each other. The commander of one army, the good guy, is on one side. The commander of the bad guys is this person B on that side. It's usually what happens in a battlefield. But the ajib nature of the creation of the insan is such that we are the commander of both armies. We're the commander of the army of the divine. We are the commander of the army of Shaytan. We lead both armies. We are in control of both armies. They report back to us, both armies do. And our choice day in and day out, hour after hour, our choice is to do what? Either strengthen one army or strengthen the other army. That's it. That's all it is. The more you give to the army of Allah, the more you don't give to the army of Shaytan. So when there is a battle, it's no contest. That's how it should be. How it is, of course, the reality on the ground is something else. Because the reality is that your biggest dushman and enemy is Shaytan. إِنَّهُ لَكُمْ عَدُوٌّ مُبِينٌ. The Quran says, open enemy. Nothing he does for you is good. He'll package it in a beautiful package. He'll present it in the most beautiful, attractive package. Sometimes in the form of a human being. Blonde hair and blue-eyed. Tall, dark, and handsome. Sometimes he'll package it in a song where the lyrics just talk to my heart, Maulana. It's like that song was written for me, Maulana. Sometimes he'll package it in the most juiciest of gossips and backbiting. The package is beautiful. And when the package is beautiful, you're dying to know what's inside. So you rip open that package. Everything he presents to you is for your own corruption and your own destruction. What was Shaitan's problem? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Let's try to understand this a little bit. We think it's as simple as saying that, look, Adam, you were made of clay, I was made of fire, I don't want to bow down to you. It's not that simple. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala very quickly, all of you have heard this 1,000 times, created Nabi Adam and then ordered all of the other creations to bow down to Adam. Adam was not the first creation of Allah's. Adam was the best creation of Allah's. Nabi Adam was the only creation of Allah. There is something called Sajda, Sajid, Masjud in the world of Arabic. Correct? Sajda is prostration, what we do in Salat. Sajid is one who does sajda. Masjud is one that sajda is done for. Since we're already here, Sajjad is one who does sajda a lot. Okay? 4 categories. Sajda, Sajid, Masjud, and Sajjad. Thank you. Sajjad. Nabi Adam, in fact, by extension, the entire creation of the insan is the only creation that has been all 4 been done to it or done by it. Yes, we believe that the trees, the suns, the planets, the flowers, they all bow down to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. يُسَبِّحُ لِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ. Surah Jummah says everything does tasbih. Okay? But no one has been ordered to bow down to another existence except for Adam. In my youth, sometimes you guys think that you can't do it. It's too hard for me. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, don't think of yourself as a ma'muli creation, as some ordinary existence. Inside of you is an alam akbar. It's a grand universe. What Allah had in store for you, how Allah elevated you, what Allah saw in you, He saw in nobody else. Ordered everyone else to bow down to Adam. Everyone bowed down to Adam except for Iblis. Okay. Why Iblis? He says to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, This conversation is noted in certain tafasir. Allah, before the creation of Adam, I worshipped you, some say for 4,000 years. Understand this for a moment, please, my youth especially. When you understand the dushman, you understand how to tackle the dushman. I have worshipped you for 4,000 years. I was your best jinn. He was a sardar of all the jinn. No one like Shaytan. Shaytan wasn't created Shaytan. Shaytan made Shaytan. Understand? Okay. Now all of a sudden when it comes time for a Khalifa of Allah to represent him, what was Nabi Adam's role? Nabi Adam's role was to make an existence like Allah that's alam, to make that existence ma'loom. He went from being the knower to now he wants to be the known Allah. I want people to know who I am. And I created you, the insan, so you could introduce me to other creations. Okay? And he chose Nabi Adam to start that process. Who's upset? Shaitan's upset. Wait a second. Whoa, wait a second. 4,000 years, man, I gave you. I worship you like nobody else. In fact, he would sit there and make a deal with God. If you ask me to not do this one act, I will worship you like no other being has ever worshipped you. Just this one act I can't do. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's reply to him is a beautiful one. He says, Shaitan, don't dictate to me how to worship me. I will tell you how to worship me. We do that too, right, sometimes? Allah, look, I do this much. I wear hijab, I have a beard. Nice sick beard, it's all lined up, nice, pretty, beautiful. I pray, I fast. Even now that I started working, I even give some khums. I do all of that. Now you want me to do all of this as well? I can't do all this. Just be happy with this, God. Don't be greedy now. I can give you this much. And be happy with that. God will say, look, don't tell me what to be happy with. I'm telling you, I want the entire package. So say Shaitan's upset. What is Shaitan upset about? That I deserve to be the Khalifa of yours on this earth. Understand this, please. Wow. It's not as simple to say clay and fire. That's a kindergarten discussion. Shaitan was upset. He was mad. How can you choose him to be your Khalifa? That was my job. I earned it. 4,000 years. What more do you want from me? I proved to you that if anyone knows you, Allah, I know you. Otherwise, I wouldn't worship you that long. He's upset. So what does he do? He challenges God. He says, I'm going to prove to you that you chose the wrong individual for your Khalifa. I will whisper to that same insan that your Adam will also whisper to. And you watch how many of your human beings will come running towards me and how many will go running towards Nabi Adam. And every single time we listen to that waswasa in our ear, we're proving Shaitan's point right. His biggest problem, Shaitan's biggest problem was that God chose the wrong guy for the Khalifa, for the Khilafat. The bahana was, yes, fire and clay, blah, blah, blah. But he's saying, no, it's wrong. I deserved that post. It was me, not Adam. So what does he do? He enters your world. He examines you. He follows you. He sends his shayateen around you. He has a beautiful database, and all of you, mashallah, have your own folder in there. Mubarak, congratulations. Your own folder with your name on it. Asad Jafri also has a name on it. Font size is 25, big, bold. Open that folder, and in that folder is a list of things that when presented to you, you forget Allah. When presented to you, you forget Allah. And everyone's list is separate. Shaytan doesn't waste time. Shaytan knows exactly what he's doing. He's been around since Nabi Adam, before Nabi Adam's time. Tried to pull every prophet off the path. Pulled every imam off the path. Tried to at least. Today is pulling us off the path. He's been around since day number one. He knows how the insan works. He has an army of shaitan. An army of shayateen. So he places something in front of you. You're at the mall and there's a group of non-mahrams who walk past you and he watches to see your reaction. If mashallah you're telling yourself, I'm enjoying the ayat of Allah, mashallah, subhanallah, it's a creation of Allah's, I'm glorifying God by watching them. Sure. Shaitan makes note of it. Non-mahram, check. You went to a store, let's say H&M or wherever you guys shop at, and let's say there's a song on the radio. And he's watching you. And you're lipping the words, every single word, mashallah, you know. You don't want to buy anything, but you hang around the store till the song is done, and then you exit the store. Music, check. You're in a gathering where there's alcohol, and you walk away from that gathering. He crosses alcohol off the list. Gathering where backbiting is happening, you actually are the voice of reason in that gathering. Guys, maybe we should talk about something else. Oh, ghibat, cross it out. And one by one, since you were born or since you were at least made baligh, he has this beautiful list in your folder of things that pulls you off the path. That's why they say everyone's shaitan is separate to them and them alone. What pulls you off the path doesn't pull me off the path. What pulls me off the path doesn't pull you off the path. You have this uncanny ability to make yourself look good in every situation. So any sin that you commit, you automatically compare yourself to people who've committed 10 more sins than you. So you wipe off your sins, oh, it's not that bad. You move on. Now what does Shaitan do? When Shaitan has this beautiful list of yours, anytime he sees that you are going towards Allah, he double clicks the folder, he sees what's on the list, and he puts that in front of you. And like baits, we catch it and we're hooked. Comes pulling towards us. What do? How do we fight this? Before Shaitan can make his own list, we should make our own list. Number one, be real with yourselves, guys. No one in this room is ma'asum. Nobody. Not the guy behind this mic, not the crowd in front of it. Nobody's ma'asum. But being unrealistic is foolish. Being somebody who actually convinces themselves that I'm a great, pious individual when you're not, I'm sorry. You're falling into the traps of Shaitan. Sallu ala Muhammad wa I've tried everything from haldi to ginger to Tylenol to Advil. I put it up in one blender, I mixed it, I drank it, I bathed in it, I tried everything. Nothing works. Inshallah, we'll get through it. Sallu ala Muhammad wa Muhammad. So what do? We have our own list. We should have our own list. We should realize that I do this great, I do this horribly. But that's where the ego comes in. That's where we don't have that sultanat over ourselves. That's when we just don't allow ourselves to say, you know what, you suck at this. You're horrible at this. You're not good at this. You can't get up for Fajr. I can't wake up. Have you tried? Set your alarm. Set 3 alarms. So on and so forth. But simply accepting the fact that I'm just good at these 4 or 5 things, Mulana, I can't do any more. The other things actually distract me. Well, Shaytan has that in your folder. Do you have that in your folder? Do you even know where your deficiencies lie? Do you accept the fact that you're deficient? It's a tough discussion to have with yourself. Because our ujb and our self-love kicks in and says, look, you're not as bad as this person is. I've said this before to you, let me say it again. The reason why we don't believe in confession, you might have a room called a confession room, but it's not a confession room. The reason why we don't believe in confession is because it gives himmat and an excuse to the person listening to the confession. Oh my God, you do that, really? And inside of your back of your mind, you think, oh my God, I'm not that bad. This person's messed up. I'm not that bad. And what you've done now is you've lowered any chance of you telling yourself you need help, you need work. All you're worried about is, oh my God, I know I don't do this, but I know that I'm not like that. And that's it. Khalas, you're done. Shaitan's got you now. Now Shaitan will sit there, he'll put that music in front of you, he'll wag that in front of you, he'll wag the non-mahram in front of you, and you'll bite every single time. And so we believe, deceive, believe, deceive, believe, deceive. And this game we play with God continues. It's a seesaw, up, down, up, down. After a while we get tired. And when you get tired on a seesaw, you stay down, you don't go back up. Very few people get stuck up here in a seesaw. When they're ready to get off, they come down. Say, good, I'm good down here. It's easier down here. That's how we are. Our peaks and valleys should be there. Imam Sajjad says it's part of the iman building process to go up and down. You're bound to have bad days and good days. But our peaks and valleys are this. His is like this. That's the difference. One day we're checked out, the next day we're checked in. Understand you before Shaitan understands you. And fix your list before he does. If music is your bait, work on that. What triggers you towards music? Find out and avoid that. Look for alternatives. Maulana, I had this one individual come to me in a different community. I never talk about the community to the community. I talk about all of you when I leave the community. Yeah. So I'm talking to you about other communities I've been to. Yeah. That's allowed, it's okay. Allah. Sallallahu Muhammad. Comes to me and says, you know, Maulana, I'm addicted to music. Straight up, I have an addiction to music. I cook, music is in my ears. I clean, music is on. I do homework, music is on. I cram for my exams. We don't study, we cram for our exams. I have music on. What do I do? I said, is your car full of CDs? Of course. Your MP3 has everything? Of course. Your laptop, everything's full. I said, can you just take everything and set it on fire for me? Sometimes the best way to fight Shaitan is to not fight Shaitan. Is to not put yourself in that arena where you're forced to fight Shaitan. We'll convince ourselves. You know, Maulana, I watch Bollywood movies, but I forward the songs. I'm sure you do. I go to a bar with my friends, but I have orange juice, okay? I go to a club, but I wait outside the club when they're done. You're putting yourself in the arena of Shaitan. It takes a very special person to not be affected by Shaitan at that moment. Don't put yourself in that position to begin with. Avoid it at all costs. Sometimes it's not possible. Sometimes it's very much possible. You're driving, let's say, to school. Your radio doesn't work. There's no CDs. What are you going to do? Sing to yourself? Sing to yourself then. But when you fool yourself and fool me in the process by saying, I'm addicted, I need help, but I won't toss out my CDs, I can't help you then. Identify your list before Shaytan does. Point number one. Point number two is that when you have this dimension of yourself that's animalistic, our shahwa, our ghadab is animalistic, and we have this dimension of ourselves that's angelic, they both want you to be the sole commander of their army. Do you understand that? No army wants to share their commander. It's our commander. We want him full time with us. Right? It's like a resident alim. You don't want him, being the resident alim of 10 different cities, where he's here 1 week, he's there 1 week. No, he's ours. Let him be here every single day. We don't want to share you with different cities. We want you here. Shabbat Jum'ah, you're here. If I need you on Saturday, you're here. These two forces inside of us are no different. Many of my youth ask me, when will Shaitan stop whispering in my ear? And the answer is never. He won't. He promised to God that I'm going to stand there on the path and do this to your creation. And he won't let up. So what do? The example is very simple. This microphone I have. I'm so sorry. This example I use in the UK as well. This microphone is attached somewhere to a soundboard in a room that only Abbas has the keys for. And the mic is set on a certain volume. If he puts the volume all the way up, let's say to 10, please follow the example. The faintest of whispers, if I begin to talk in a whisper, you can still hear me loud and clear. The young sisters in the back in the chair can hear me as well if I whisper. If he puts the volume down to 1 or 0 and I whisper, they can't hear me. The whisper is still there. It's not affected, or I'm not being affected by the whisper. One more time. You guys didn't get it. The microphone is set to the volume of the number 10, let's say, the highest volume possible. I speak in a very low whisper. The low whisper sounds like you're actually screaming sometimes, because the volume is so high. You put the volume down to 0, I'll start to whisper again, you can't hear me. The whisper still exists, it's not affecting you. The microphone and the volume control of the whispers of Allah inside of us and the whispers of Shaitan inside of us. The volume control is in our hands. If we decide to put the volume control of Shaitan's mic on 10, the faintest of his whispers will be a booming voice we can't ignore inside of us. If we decide to put Shaitan's whisper on 0 and Allah's whisper on 10, he can keep whispering all he wants. He won't stop whispering, right? He won't stop whispering. But it'll be 0 in terms of the effect. Why? Because the volume of Allah's mic is on 10. Allah could be screaming or yelling or whispering. I will still hear him louder than I can hear Shaitan. My brothers and my sisters, my youth, my beloved youth, the soundboard of your microphones are in your hands. There's 2 mics that are chirping at you constantly. You have control of the soundboard. You can choose sometimes to put the volume on 0 or on 10. You don't need to always say labbaik to Shaitan every time he says do something. You can fight it and not curl up in a ball and say I can't do it. Because every time you say you can't do it to Shaitan, that's one victory and one notch of him being weaker. And every time that Allah says do it and you do something right away, that's one notch higher in Allah. And all we're trying to do is build one army stronger than the other. So even if this army tries to attack the other one, it's not going to be victorious. And that's our battle. And that's when you become sultanan ala nafsihi, like Imam Ali says. And that is the most courageous person out there. Is the one who has authority over himself. Allah created us to represent Him in this world. Do you know what an amazing responsibility that is? Look, when a CEO of a company leaves for 6 months on a trip, he says, in my absence, I'm going to ask this guy who started last week to come and run the show. No one does that. He just started. He knows nothing about the company. What he will do is choose that individual who's the closest to him in qualities. Who can say, you know what, even though I may not be there, he can run the show properly. Allah says, look, you need to represent me in this earth. I chose you because you are the one who's closest to me in qualities. You have the potential to be a reflection of me and my tajalli. Many times we wonder, Malana, is what I'm doing working? My ibadat, my worship. I try very hard. I wear hijab, I grow a beard, I'm trying hard. Is it working or not? One way you can be for sure that's working. One way that you can rest assured that it's working, that the ulama of akhlaq have told us, is if you slowly start to reflect your qualities by Allah's qualities. The essence of Tawheed, as I said in the majlis in the daytime yesterday, is not just La ilaha illallah. The essence is that we have to be a tajalli, a manifestation of Allah's qualities. If we beg Allah for His mercy, we have to be merciful ourselves. If we call Allah Ya Sattar al-Uyub, then we also have to be the concealer of defects. We ask Allah, Allah conceal my faults. In the same breath, we expose the faults of others. Oh Allah, have mercy on me. Meanwhile, your sister, your brother, your spouse, your children, your aunt, your in-laws are begging you for your forgiveness. And you won't forgive them, but you're begging Allah for His forgiveness. He'll say, look, show me the quality you want from me first, inside of you. Then I'll show you my quality. If that starts to happen inside of you, then know that what you're doing is working. Otherwise, it's hypocrisy. Allah, I worship you, I believe in you, your sifat, everything, your asma al-husna, I believe in your joshan kabir, 1,000 of your qualities, I believe. That belief has to be shown inside of you. And then we can have this idea of sultanan ala nafsihi. The courageous of you are those who have authority over themselves. Your nafs, your animalistic side of you, was not meant to control you. It was meant to be controlled by you. Desire and shahwa is not an evil concept. It's a blessing from Allah. Anger is not an evil concept. It's a blessing from Allah. There are moments where we should be angry. There are moments where our desire should be there, provided it's controlled by our angelic dimension inside of us. What makes us higher than any human being or any other creation is the fact that Allah gave us aql and reasoning, as you guys know. But sometimes, my youth, you guys make decisions where you have given up on life. You've convinced yourself and those around you, I can't do any more than this. You've told God, God, I know you want this from me, but I'm giving you this instead. And sometimes what ends up happening is that we try to give Him more, we end up giving Him more. We surprise ourselves. But don't be like that snake catcher who believes that I've conquered this portion of my soul, let's move on. Don't be that naive. Constantly work on yourself. Better yourself. It's a mountain, guys. Climb up the mountain inch by inch. It's not a race, it's a journey. Right? Accept that journey and move up the mountain, inshallah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. We are slowly approaching those the night of the Shahadat of our fourth Imam. Just a few minutes of Masai. Unfortunately, my voice is not cooperating tonight. Imam Sajjad's role in Karbala was a very difficult one. And one can argue that the amount of musibat that he witnessed, nobody else did in this whole journey, not even his own father. Imam Sajjad was the one who, of course, was there from the beginning when they left Medina. He was there when they returned back to Medina. Imam Sajjad was that one who, after Abu Abdullah buried Ali Asghar, he took Zainab and went in the khayma of Imam Sajjad. Imam Sajjad, they say, was resting. He was very sick. Imam Hussein shook the shoulders of Imam Sajjad. Imam Sajjad opened his eyes and looked up to his father, who was covered in blood from head to toe, zakhmi upon zakhmi. There was arrows all over him. Everything was torn up. He looked at him and he said, Baba, Aina Habib ibn Mudahir? Where is Habib, Baba? He says, Ya Bunayya qad qutil, he's been killed. He says, Baba, Aina Muslim ibn Awsaja? Where is Muslim ibn Awsaja? Ya Bunayya qad qutil. He says, Baba, Aina Aliyun Akbar? Where is Ali Akbar? Ya Bunayya qad qutil. And then he says, Baba, Aina Abul Fazl al-Abbas? Where is Abbas, Baba? He says, my son, understand that besides me and you, there's no other men left in this army. They say Imam Sajjad, with a lot of himmat and courage, attempted to get up off his bed and reach for his sword. How could it be that my father is left alone and I'm lying here? Imam Hussein says, no, my son, your mission is something else. Your journey is about to begin. Your Karbala begins after I leave this world. Your Ashura begins in Kufa and Sham. Imam Sajjad was that same Imam that when the courtyard of Yazid came and the Qafila was outside of this courtyard, and there were 7 doors, our books tell us, to Yazid's courtyard. After the 6th door, when the 7th door opened, there in front of Bibi Zainab's eyes were 700 men who were sitting there waiting for this tamasha and this circus to begin of parading the women of Ali Muhammad around. And Bibi Zainab for the first time showed her jalal and sat there and said, I will not enter this courtyard. Imam Sajjad says, Papi Amma, if you can, please, a little bit of more courage. A little bit, I'm with you, let's enter the courtyard together. What Imam Sajjad saw was incredible. In the days of Arba'in, when Jabir ibn Abdullah Ansari was the first Zaid of Abu Abdullah, and he was calling out for Imam Hussein, and he finally found the grave of Abu Abdullah, his servant says, Mawla, there's a qafila and a caravan coming in the distance. I think we should leave. He says, because Jabir was blind, he says, describe to me this qafila. He says, Mawla, there's black flags everywhere. There's women draped in black. He says, do you see a man in this qafila? He says, yes, I see a man, but he's a very old man. He has white hair. He has a scar around his neck like something was holding his neck up. He says, take me towards that man. The slave of Jabir takes Jabir towards Imam Sajjad. Imam Sajjad is standing there. Jabir says, who are you? He says, Jabir, you don't recognize who I am. Ana Ali ibn al-Husayn. I am the son of Hussein. He says, Mawla, what is this that's being described of you? White hair, there is marks around your neck. He says, Jabir, what do I tell you? Where do I start? Do I tell you, Jabir, about Ali Akbar, the moment that my father laid down the body of Ali Akbar on the plains of Karbala, grabbed the spear by his hand, turned towards Najaf and said, Baba, you're the one that ripped the door of Khaybar, that took 40 men to open and close, but have you ever ripped a barchi and a spear out of the chest of your young son? I saw with my own eyes, Jabir, the moment where my father put one knee on the chest of Ali Akbar and one foot on the plains of Karbala, grabbed the barchi and yelled out, Ya Ali, and ripped that spear out of the chest of Ali Akbar. I witnessed that, Jabir. I saw that moment where Abu al-Fazl al-Abbas fell from the horse. Alama Majlisi narrates that one night when I read the Masa'ib of Abu al-Fazl al-Abbas, Shahzadi, Sayyidah Fatima Zahra came inside my dream and said, Majlisi, may Allah accept your service for my son. Thank you for reciting the Masa'ib of Abu al-Fazl, but you didn't recite the Musibat of Abu al-Fazl. He says, Shahzadi, I read the Masa'ib, I read what I knew. What is the Musibat of your Abu al-Fazl? She says, Majlisi, you read the Masa'ib, no doubt. But the Musibat is that when there are people sitting in front of you listening to the Masa'ib of my Abu al-Fazl, tell them, let them know that when someone falls from a horse, they use their arms to break their fall. My Abbas didn't have arms to break his fall. He fell on that arrow that was shot by Hurmala in his eye. I was there. I witnessed that, Jabir, when Abbas fell from his horse. I witnessed that when the alam came back to the khayma and the alamdar didn't come back to the khayma. And I saw a 4-year-old Sakina run out to the Maidan of Karbala and scream, Chacha Abbas, this Sakina is not thirsty anymore. This Sakina is not thirsty anymore. سَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. معتمر حسين.